Hello, everybody, and welcome to the No BS Zone. I'm Bernie Goldberg, here with my good friend John Daly. How you doing, John?
I'm good, Bernie. How about you?
So far, so good. You know, we talk a lot about Donald Trump and Republicans. Let's start out talking, and we will again today. Let me let me warn everybody about that. But let's start out talking about Democrats. And forgive me for stating the obvious. The Democratic Party has a problem. Republicans, of course, don't like them. No bulletin there. But Democrats don't like Democrats. There's a wing of the party, the left wing, progressive wing of the party, that says the establishment is behind the times and things need to change. And they don't want compromise with the Republican Party, according to the polls. They want, if not a new generation, at least a new generation of thinking to fight with Republicans. So you have AOC and Bernie Sanders going on tour and drawing big crowds, very big crowds. They're the stars of the party. I think they were in your hometown, John,
They
uh,
were.
Colorado. We'll talk about that in a minute. I want to know if you were there, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So my question to start this off is this a wise political strategy going forward to put progressive faces as the new faces of the Democratic Party? Gavin Newsom, certainly a progressive former governor of California, is now moving to the middle. I make no predictions. You know, regulars know that because my crystal ball broke after I predicted in 2016 that Donald Trump would not run for president. So the crystal ball is still up in the attic and it's still cracked. But I'm going to mention a name. I don't know how progressive he is. I know he's liberal. He's a Democrat. Governor Westmore of Maryland. Let me tell you something. This guy is a veteran. He's a former businessman. He's likable, and never underestimate the power of likability. If Republicans continue to offend as many independents as they're currently offending, I'm telling you, this is not a prediction, but I'm saying Wes Moore can very well be the next president of the United States of America. Anyway, to the question of whether this strategy of sort of dumping the existing establishment and going for a new, more progressive look is a wise political move. What do you think, John?
In the long term, no. In an off year where the party that's out of power is trying to fire up their base to show up for the midterms, next year, maybe there's some political wisdom to it. But do I think it's the right direction for the party? No. Donald Trump and other Republicans didn't win last November because the Democrats weren't progressive enough. I'm pretty sure that's true. That wasn't the problem. Yet I think a lot of Democratic voters, might think that it was indeed the problem, and the people that are out there, sort of the activist wing of the party, they see them as having all the energy, having all the momentum, and I don't think it's a recipe for success, but that in this pendulum swing we go back and forth. Trump's already playing is already overplaying his hand. I think it's safe to say I think that helps Democrats. It will help Democrats. I don't think really necessarily any lessons were learned from why they lost last year, which is sort of an ongoing theme in our politics. When someone loses an election, panic. No one really sort of looks at the broader picture. I shouldn't say no one, but not enough people look at the broad picture and adjust. They kind of go back to what feels comfortable, to where they see the excitement, and they sort of try to ratchet it up.
Ask anybody in the polls if they think this federal government is too big, they say yes. Do they think there's waste and fraud? Yes. Do they want to cut the size of government? Yes. Do they want to cut out waste and fraud? Yes. Do they like the way the Elon Musk and Donald Trump are proceeding with it? No. That's the problem. It's not that they don't, the American people, the American voter doesn't like the idea of cutting government. They don't like the way this administration is doing it. And that That's a problem in the present tense, and I hate talking about politics in the future. Excuse me. I know I talked about the next presidential race, but if Elon Musk and Donald Trump remain unpopular in the midterms next year, and Democrats take control of the House, do you think they won't try to impeach Donald Trump again for the third time? I am absolutely convinced they will, because they won't have anybody to worry about pushing back on them. That's what their party wants. That's what the progressive wing of their party wants. They're not going to get blowback from the Democratic Party if they do that. And I think they will. And that'll cause more polarization, more people getting turned off of politics. It's not a good thing, but I think it's a very real possibility, John.
I haven't thought about it much, but you're probably right. People, I think, Trump was impeached twice during his first term. I think the first one was sort of iffy. I never thought it was a good idea. Second one, I was very much on board with. But people should remember that before that first one, before the perfect call with Zelensky and Ukraine, the Democrats were already signaling that they were going to try to impeach Trump, and at that time it was like, okay, but for what? It didn't really. And then this situation fell into their lap. So, well, you bring up a good point. I think the Democratic base certainly wants it. If Democrats get the majority in the midterms in some way, which I think they probably will, but it's a ways out. That could change. No, I think what you're saying makes sense.
I mentioned that AOC and Bernie Sanders are on tour and they're drawing big crowds. And one of the stops was your hometown,
Yes.
Greeley, Colorado. I don't know if you want to talk about this publicly.
Sure.
Did you attend the rally?
No. There's about as much chance of me showing up at a Democratic rally as there is me going to a MAGA rally. It's like it's just not going to happen, even at.
Well, tell me about it though. How did it go?
So I live in Greeley, Colorado. Colorado in recent years has turned deep blue. We were a sort of a purple state for a long time. We were kind of red state before, but we've changed. But where I live, Greeley in Weld County, we're still pretty red, actually. I wouldn't say we're hardcore MAGA, but we lean conservative. But from what I understand, like you said, that the Democratic Socialist tag team of Sanders and AOC had a pretty big turnout. I read it was about 16,000 people showed up, which is I'm sure it wasn't. I know that wasn't just from Greeley and Weld. I'm sure people from all over the state were showing up as well, maybe from even up north. But they spoke at my old alma mater, UNC. That's where I graduated from. It's they're. I think it's safe to say that they are seen as Democratic celebrities. I know a lot of my Facebook friends I saw were posting pictures from some, my more liberal Facebook friends. So people were very excited about it. I'm not excited. That stuff's never going to excite me. Those two don't really have any common views with me. I'm sure there's something, if I was to dig deep enough that I would agree with them on. But it's my son works here in town, and he said, traffic was a mess. He was getting off work around the time things were ending. So it was a big event.
It was a big deal. It was a big deal, and they moved further west, and they drew big crowds there too. That's why I'm wondering if the Democrats go down this road. Bernie Sanders is too old. Well, he's not literally too old to run, but if his ideas are at the forefront, if AOC's ideas are at the forefront, it's going to be interesting because they'll draw a lot of Democrats. The question is, will independents who voted for Donald Trump last time around be so disaffected with Donald Trump and Elon Musk that they'll go with a progressive ticket on the left? But anyway, excuse the cliche, time will tell. Now, let's move on. A lot of our subscribers say we talk too much about Donald Trump. They may be right. But look, I've said this before. He's the president of the United States. He makes news every 10 minutes, every 2 minutes, probably. Every time he opens his mouth, it's newsworthy. So we talk about him. And in my recent column, the one that went up this week, I'm wondering if he's trying to get us to a new. I don't mean this literally. I want to be clear about that in the beginning. He renamed the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. Is he trying to rename the United States of America the United States of Donald Trump? I don't mean it literally. I don't think he's crazy enough to take a chance doing that. But, but in a span of several days, he said CNN was illegal. Now, is CNN a popular, I mean, CNN has been carrying water for the Democratic Party, so he knows that that resonates. He said that Joe Biden's pardons as he walked out the door were illegal. Well, a lot of people, and not just MAGA Republicans, didn't like Biden pardoning his political friends and his close family. He said a federal judge should be impeached. Why? Because the judge made a decision Trump didn't like. The decision had to do with gang members being shipped off to El Salvador. Do people like gang members illegal who came here illegally in this country? No. So Trump knows that these things resonate. He understands that. I wrote in the column, he's not Aristotle, which would be unfair to Donald Trump and unfair to Aristotle. But he's not a small thinker, and he knows what he's doing in this respect. So my question is he trying to mold the United States of America into the United States of Donald Trump, where he only wants people who agree with him? If you're here illegally and you don't agree with him, there's a good chance you're going to be put on a plane and shipped out. I think this is a dangerous thing. What do you think, John?
No, I agree. I think he sees himself, as the rule of law in this country, or at least that's how he thinks it should be. It's all about him. He sees, he doesn't have the guardrails that he had during his first term. I recently wrote about that. But yeah, he's right now he thinks and he won't call himself king, or I think he actually did post something about him being the king of the United States. But I think in some ways that I think that simplifies it a little bit too much. But he sees himself as this.
No, hold on. I don't think it simplifies it too much. I think if he could snap his fingers and make himself king, he would.
Right. No, I agree with that. Yes. But it's kind of going back to the original point you brought up about us talking about Trump too much. It's sort of I see a lot of irony there, because I hear all the time, not just on the website, but online, other places. I hear from Trump fans who really always kind of brag to me about how Trump is taking a blowtorch to the way things were, that he's upending our institutions, he's just demolishing the old order. But then when I argue essentially the same thing in my writing and make the point that this stuff is highly consequential, what I hear from those same people is, well, you're making too big of a deal out of it. You have TDS, clearly. I mean, what are you talking about? This is no big, and it's, so I don't know which one it is, but I'm reminded, Bernie, you might remember this as well. So back when Obama was president, he would go out there on the stump and talk about the need to fundamentally transform our nation.
Yes.
That was the
Yes.
phrase he was using.
Yes.
Republicans at the time jumped all over that, and I think with good reason.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
Yeah, and Bill O'Reilly, he's a friend of the podcast or the show here, of the Bernard Goldberg website. I believe, if I remember right, he even took Obama to task for that phrasing during a Super Bowl interview. So in the position of a lot of Republicans at the time was, hey, we like our nation, we like our traditions. As a country, we stand for a lot of good things. Why then do we need to fundamentally transform it? And what I see Trump is trying, at least, to do in a second term, whether people like it or not, is fundamentally transform our nation. Destroying long-lasting, mutually beneficial free trade partnerships. That has an enormous effect. This trade war has an enormous effect on the economy, on our business sectors, consumer costs, government subsidies, all that. He's alienating and abandoning our allies, even suggesting that he may invade some of them for their land. He's regularly threatening to pull us out of NATO. That's a pretty big deal. Always trying to make Vladimir Putin happy. That's a different approach to Russia. All kinds. I could go on and on, but that's what he's trying to do. And now, when we talk about it, as we did with Obama, I talked about this fundamental transformation stuff. We're deranged, Bernie. We have derangement syndrome.
I don't want this to go to your head, but that's a brilliant point.
Thank you, sir.
And I'm going to probably steal it and write about it. By the way, I don't know if people watching have noticed, but I'm in our new studio.
Yes, I
I
can't believe I didn't say anything
a
about
lot of
that.
money. I spent a lot of money building this studio,
Yes.
which is AI, by the way. And that's why I keep asking all of you, tell your friends about us. Tell your relative, buy a subscription for a family member. I mean, we need people subscribing. We need people subscribing to get our message out and have some influence. I don't do this to try to change people's minds, but I'd like people to listen to us and consider what we say. Anyway, that's always on my mind. So let me get that out. And I hope you like my new studio. Let's move on to a final topic. The terror of Tesla. People on the Daily Show the other day, they ran a segment with video of Teslas on fire and Tesla dealerships on fire. And the audience laughed and cheered. And I thought, this is what they did with Luigi Mangione when he shot a CEO in the back on a Manhattan street in the morning. What the hell is going on? Is this the sanctum? Look, this is not all Democrats, of course, not all liberals, not all progressives, but there is a wing of young progressives. They don't have to be the ones throwing the Molotov cocktails, but if they're cheering about it, if they're laughing about it, they're almost just as bad. Something is going on, and I don't like it. John, I mean,
No,
I
I
know
think
you don't like it either, but I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on, is this a sanctimony of the young progressive left that we know what's right, we know what's wrong, and if we think something is wrong, we'll deal with it any way we want. And if we're not the ones actually pulling the trigger or throwing the Molotov cocktails, when we hear about it, we'll cheer for it. And they literally cheered for both of those things, Mangione and the Tesla terror. They literally laughed and cheered for it. It's disgusting.
No, and I'm glad you call it terror, because I think it is. I was asked about this in the Q&A last week, and yeah, I mean, this obviously this is terrible. I view it, at least the acts of arson, as a form of domestic terrorism. There's been harassment, but yeah, it goes back to Elon Musk's involvement in our politics, so it definitely fits the bill. And I think those responsible should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, of course. But yeah, it's I think what we're seeing, and it's very ugly. You see these acts of violence, and because it's hits a certain type of person on a certain wavelength, it's deemed sort of okay, or it's even worthy of cheering. I think, and people get mad when I point out both sides. Lots of people have downplayed radical
January
violence.
6th.
Right. Well.
January 6th.
Yeah, exactly right. And people have had to try to rewrite it for the last 4 years to make it something that it was not. Anybody who watches what happened to that day with an open mind understands what we saw. But sticking on the other, but yeah, I think we're so polarized politically that people are finding ways to condone stuff like this because
Right.
they see it as hurting the right. And to be clear, it's really pretty stupid to begin with. The whole idea that setting a Tesla dealership ablaze is really getting back at Elon Musk somehow. He's already. This is not hurting Elon Musk. This is hurting business owners, local business owners, people who are trying to make a living that probably in many cases don't agree with Musk as well. I mean, it's stupid, but it should be called out as well. It is terrorism.
Here's an idea. Here's a brilliant idea that nobody's ever thought of. If you don't like a Tesla, don't buy it. I mean,
right.
Just don't buy it. And if you want to organize your friends and tell them not to buy it, tell your friends not to buy it. But what's going on is wrong. I brought up January 6th. I just want to make clear why I brought that up. Because MAGA Republicans played that down. it was either the FBI or Antifa that was behind it all. And they said, well, it's in effect, it's not that big a deal. You know, it's you're overblowing it, you people on the left and you rhino Republicans. But this is a big deal. No, they're both big deals. One may be a bigger deal than the other. One tried to overthrow the U.S. government. I don't think they could have overthrown a lemonade stand, these idiots. But they tried to do something. And I'm not making equality comparisons, but I'm saying the MAGA right played down the violence on January 6th, and the crazy, crazy wing of the progressive left is literally laughing and cheering about this. And it's a result of something very bad going on in our culture. And we better get a hold of it. We better get a hold of it, because if this side thinks they can get away with it, the other side's going to think, well, why shouldn't we get away with it too? It's got to stop. Speaking of having to stop, I think it's time for us to stop. Again, I'm in my new control room. I hope you like it, John.
I do. I was a little concerned, Bernie. I saw there was, and I don't see it now, but there was a timer behind you, some sort of countdown timer that wasn't moving. It was almost like time had stood still. So, yeah, I found that a little bit troubling.
Time always stands still when I'm talking. People stop and listen. All right, everybody. Listen, thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate it more than you know. I'm going to repeat the usual request. Tell your friends. Get a subscription for a family member or a friend. We need more people tuning in. It makes us all more important, including you, our friends who are listening to us. So thank you. And thank you, John.
Thanks, Bernie. You have a great day.
Until next time. Bye-bye.